Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Business Committee meeting of June the 8th, 2022 to order. It's with great respect and humility that we acknowledge and honor the lands of the Seismic people. The Seismic people maintain their profound, unique spiritual connection to the land through ageless traditions, teachings, stewardship, and expressions of reciprocity. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Trustee O'Neill, thank you. And I have a seconder, Trustee McKay. Thank you. Anyone opposed to approving the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Moving on to item 6, approval of the minutes of the Business Committee meeting held on May the 11th, 2022. Can I get someone to move the motion? Moved by Trustee Brzovic, seconded by Trustee McKay. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Anyone opposed to the motion? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 7.1, Kristen Singbill, and I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. Please correct me if I did not. From the NDTA, providing a professional development report.
Yeah, Kristen Singbill, that's right.
Great.
I have a PowerPoint as well as that. Are you able to see it?
You will have to share your screen. Perhaps, I'm not sure if you're able to do that or if you'll need assistance, but go ahead.
Okay. Oh, I don't know if I can. Okay. It's telling me that I need to install some drivers to do that.
Uh-oh.
That's okay. I could just present on that right now then without.
If that works for you, we do have, I believe there's information in our agenda to follow along to for anyone, trustees or others who want to follow along. So, or yep, Karen,
Okay.
that's a good suggestion that we could do as well from Trustee Higginson. Perhaps Karen could share it on the screen.
I'm just opening that up. I'll just be a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here we are.
All right, so this is our Prody committee. Most of the people were reoccurring members. We did have a couple of new people on our committee, Loa Richardson and Laura Belanda. So that was nice to see a secondary and a coordinator or itinerant teacher as well on the committee. District Day this year was virtual again, like last year. We weren't sure until the fall what it would be. And we had a speaker booked, and then 2 weeks before she was suffering from blindness and wasn't able to work with us anymore. So unfortunately, at the last minute, we had to find a new keynote speaker, and luckily Dr. Nancy Turner helped us out with that, and we were so grateful for her. And actually she did it for no cost, just a donation to Wildwood's Eco Forest education programs, which was so amazing as well, and her work was so appreciated by everyone who saw it. She spoke a lot about plants and about the environment and being a good relative on the land, and it was something that related to basically any area of teaching, as well as to the CETS family framework and what we're working with in Untitled as well. And so our theme ended up being learning from the land. And although we were virtual this year, we ended up having more presenters than we did last year. I think we had, can you show us the next slide? Yeah, over 30 facilitators this year. So we had over 35 sessions, most virtual, and we did have a couple that were in-person sessions. One was at VIU for secondary student support teachers, and the other was at Wildwood and on their ecoforestry programs and what's available for teachers and students out there. And then the rest of our topics, as you can see here, we had a lot on equity and inclusion, a lot to do with environment, Indigenous perspectives. We had an Indigenous author come and speak at one of the sessions, place-based learning, learning from the land. We had one on eating disorders, which ended up being quite full, as we'd never had that before. And that was presented in with the VIHA as well as the school district teachers. For our individual funds, this is where the majority of our funding goes to. This year, we are in our first year of the 3-year cycle, and teachers had access to $300 for this year per 1.0 FTE, and then they could also apply for next year's $300 as well. TTOCs, again, had the same amount. And here's just some examples of where we saw a lot of the funding being used for. A lot were used for books again, but now that workshops and conferences and things have started happening, people were excited to use their funds and go away somewhere and actually be in person. And there was a lot of new conferences that took place this year. PSA memberships again were another big one, drum making. And we actually changed our Pro-D policy at the beginning of this year to include buying supplies for Indigenous workshops. So anything to do with like drum making or paddle making, weaving, any supplies that you needed for those workshops, Pro-D funds could be used for. We had our professional learning groups. Again, we put a lot of our funding into the collaboration opportunities this year. So professional learning groups were huge. I believe we had, yes, so they can receive up to $2,000 to use for resources or one release day each for up to 8 people in the group. So that costs us about $3,200 for release time if we're using that. But I believe we had over almost 200 teachers participating in PLG this year. And about half of our PLG groups were from teachers from multiple schools, not just the same school. And here are some of the topics. We had IST teachers getting together, librarians together, story workshop, loose parts, and Regio. Learning were all really big this year and things that a lot of teachers wanted to know about. And also the coordinators put on a workshop series for that as well, which helped a lot of us that are in these PLG groups. Inquiry, land-based learning, environmental education, and professional book clubs. We saw a lot of people buying Indigenous books, a lot of writing sweetgrass. So I think a lot of people are ready for the NLPS Learns from the Land this summer because people have already started with that book. And professional learning partnerships. We had, I believe, 10 of these this year. And that was for 2 teachers to work together and to help support each other through their teaching, if they wanted to go to a new grade or to see how somebody else works in their classroom. For this instance, they get 2 release days each to work together, and they can choose how they want to use that. And here's a lot of the topics that were used this year. And they're usually for things that are unique, like the one on textiles or Indigenous perspectives in home economics, CBT for student health and wellness, phonics programs, Indigenous storytelling and perspectives. So anything that teachers were really wanting to learn more about and work really closely with a colleague. We allow them to have that release time to do so, or to observe each other in their teaching, or even teach together. I do have a budget statement up until, yours goes up until the end of March, and that has been included as well with all of our receipts and disbursements. And I believe that was everything. Is there questions or anything?
Thank you for, yes, no, thank you for your presentation. And I'll open up the floor for questions if you like, if you're willing. And I do see we do have a question from Trustee Higginson. So go ahead, Stephanie.
Good evening. Hi, Kristen. Thanks for your presentation. You know, seeing that this is such an important part of student success, making sure that, you know, the teachers have an ongoing professional learning. I'm wondering if any of these, so you've got professional learning groups, the learning partnerships, and then district day, all the supplemental releases. I just wonder if any of that utilizes sort of district or school level data to help inform where professional learning should be happening. So for instance, when I look at our numeracy assessment results, they're, you know, low, which is happening across the province. I think it has to do with the change in the, you know, the curriculum and updating the assessment. But is there any, does data and student data come into forming the topics that will be used?
Well, teachers do have professional autonomy, so they choose their own. So I can't speak to what each teacher does and what they look at. We do, like for district day, we put out and we ask people what they're interested in learning about, because that we do kind of have one theme for the whole day. Also, the topics are very broad for the actual workshops that they can choose to go to. And then school-based days, I do think that a lot of the times they look at what's going on in the school, and then the staff get together as a group and decide what they would like to work on. We do have some people that will always decide to do like self-directed Pro-D, but most school-based days, the staffs all work together.
I see Trustee Higginson had stepped out, so thank you. Moving on to the next speaker is Trustee Bailey.
Thank you, Kristen. I know that those professional development days are a lot of work to organize for all of the teachers in the school district. Just had my own comment was, I was really pleased to see that you were that the Pro-D committee has made a decision to allow some of the funding to be spent on resources for Indigenous focused learning. So that's really appreciated and I think appropriate. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, we kind of were letting that happen anyways, but we just put it into our policy to make sure that it was definitely approved, and that we could differentiate from people wanting to buy like an art supplies and from wanting to actually participate in a cultural workshop.
Great, thank you. So moving on to Trustee McKay.
Thank you. First a comment, then a question. First, I just want to express my gratitude for being able to participate this year in the Pro-D Day and hearing some of the speakers and being able to participate in some of the workshops. It had a really positive effect for me and actually helped me professionally develop myself. So, you know, just what I took away from that day was really important in the work that I do in my role as well. So I wanted to express my gratitude for the work that went into planning this year. My question for you is, and I think you talked about it a little bit, but so what is your process for planning district day, for example? You know, like when do you have to have that figured out by?
So we start in May of the year before. We start planning district day really well in advance, trying to book the speakers, and then once we have the main speaker booked and the theme, then we just kind of work on the process of everything going on in the background. And then starting in about the end of November, we put out a call for workshop presenters. And then that closes right before the winter break. And then we choose the presenters from all of the people that have applied. And yeah, and then set up. And when it's in person, it takes basically a full day the day before to set up the school for everything and make sure every room has the projector working and everything that the presenters need. And then clean up and everything afterwards. So it is a big process with District Day. We've already started looking at next year. We were wanting to look at but we're thinking of like dismantling white supremacy, racism, microaggressions, and discrimination as a topic.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you so much. I can imagine how much work goes into it, and I appreciate you sharing a little bit of that with me, given how important it was for me to have that chance to participate with you. So thanks very much.
I hope you can come again next year.
Me too.
Would you like a follow-up, Trustee McKay? Great. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Trustee Higginson.
Back. Just because I think professional learning days are one of the, the biggest things that we talk about with families. When kids are out of school, they all want to know what teachers are doing and all those types of things. So when I look at the list of topics that are covered, I'm wondering if we have, and you mentioned the last question that I asked you, so, teachers have professional autonomy, so they choose what they want to focus on based on, experience or interest. So I'm wondering how we know, how do we know that teachers are furthering their professional learning in areas that might be critical to student success, but might not be something that's an area of personal interest to them. So I think about, well, it's probably an area of personal interest to every teacher, but I think about right now, one of the things that we hear a lot about is around supporting, teaching and supporting learning for neurodiverse students. So when a teacher has autonomy over, I'm trying to sort of thread this needle based on what you said earlier about autonomy. When a teacher has autonomy, is there a way for us collectively to know that teachers are moving their professional learning forward in this in particular areas that we know are changing and shifting always, but really critical to student learning?
Well, we don't ask them to submit unless they're doing an individual self-directed, then they submit what they're working on. But other than that, like when it's a school-based Purdy Day, we don't know what's going on at each school. That's decided by their own committees within the schools. But I know that often it might not be something directly related to that teacher. Like for myself as a librarian, maybe we will do outdoor education and PE games or math games, but I'm always going to learn something from that if that's what's important to the whole school. So I do believe that whatever the schools work on for their choice for the school-based days, that it will impact everybody in the school and help with furthering what the students need. Our school chose to look at the history of our school this year, particularly with the name change, and to learn more about the background and the history and with the marsh and the land and everything going on around, and that impacted every one of us, and in turn we could work on that with the students.
Thank you. Thanks.
Like a follow-up, Trustee Higginson? Great. Okay. Well, I don't see anyone else on our speakers list, so I'd just like to thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 8.1 under senior staff reports. Sean Johnson with a report regarding accessibility.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. As the board is aware, the province has been working on accessibility legislation for some time. Recent order in council has provided some clarity to this legislation. So the memo I've provided is an update on the legislative clarifications, the district's responsibilities, and work that has been done to date. This is legislation that the public sector knew was in the works and the district has been working towards for some time. This legislation aims to increase accessibility across BC by identifying, removing, and preventing barriers to participation for persons with disabilities. The way this legislation is written recognizes that addressing accessibility is best done as a local exercise with some prescribed actions. So for the district, this work is for our staff and our stakeholders to undertake together. The newly enacted legislation provides the following clarity as outlined in the memo. Some important dates for us. By September 1st, 2022, the district must have established an accessibility committee and started or looking to consult with that committee over the next year on producing an accessibility plan. The Act provides some prescribed composition for that committee. At least half the participants must be persons with disabilities or persons representing disability serving organizations. And the committee must, as much as possible, reflect the diversity of the province of BC and have Indigenous representation. By 1 year after we're required to have that committee established, the district must have an accessibility plan in place. So over that year, we'll consult with that committee on the plan. And the plan must consider the principles of inclusion, adaptability, diversity, collaboration, self-determination, and universal design. And then the final requirement under this new legislation is that we'll have to review that plan at least every 3 years, and that process will include public consultation. So as I said, the district knew that this legislation was coming and had started some work. There's been an ad hoc committee working on this topic, and they've developed a tool to conduct accessibility gap analysis. And they've worked on refining our internal processes to ensure that the district can efficiently and effectively respond to accessibility requests or issues that are brought to our attention. And so the next steps will be for the district to establish that committee with that required composition and keep this work moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. Thank you for your presentation. I do see that we have a question from Trustee Berzovic, and who may or may not be frozen right now. We'll see.
I'm unfrozen now.
He's unfrozen now. Great.
15 seconds. I think I missed the last part of what you said, Mr. Johnson, but that's okay. So my question, I have a couple questions, but I'll stick to one for now and I'll see if I can get another one in. My question is, what is the board's role? Is the board to approve this accessibility plan or review this accessibility plan, or what's our role in all this? Do we know?
I don't know.
And that's fair.
Mark Walsh might have an idea on that.
I see that Ms. Steele had popped up. Would you like to weigh in on this one?
My understanding is that we are required as a system to create a plan that's in keeping with the legislation and have it prepared. I think we have to have the committee by next fall, and a year after that, we have to have a plan in existence and be implementing it.
Okay. Which leads to my follow-up.
Go ahead.
And it does all tie in together. Has there been any mention of any money available to implement the plans? Because some of the things that we're going to need to do are going to involve money.
There is some money. Oh, I'm sorry, Chair.
No, that's okay. I see perhaps Mr. Johnston and Mr. Walsh popped up as well. So I'll leave it up to you folks to decide who wants to respond.
Mr. Johnston is appropriately placed. We're not aware of any additional funds flowing to the district to support this at this time.
There is some money in this legislation for the provincial committee that's a part of this as well, but that's not directly related to our operation. Yeah.
Okay. So if I can make a comment just to
go ahead.
So basically what my frustration is, we now have to do this work, which we need to do. I mean, I support the idea of doing the work. We're going to discover that we have schools that have certain problems that need to be addressed. And that I'm just thinking mobility, and I haven't even thought about other disabilities. And what we're going to end up with is putting requests in for capital projects, which are already have a high demand on it. So what this shows to me is we're going to need to think, the next board will need to start thinking about more advocacy around capital funding and this particular concern. Because, I mean, I can think of 3 schools off the top of my head that have things that in order to be fully compliant with an accessibility audit, have things that need to be done.
See that Mr. Walsh popped up. Would you like to respond?
Sure, through his chair. I think it's also interesting to note that this is actually very good timing for this particular legislation to take place. I think just because of what Trustee Burzovich was talking about, the fact is we are anticipating hopefully rebuilding Ladysmith Intermediate in one form or another, as well as we're working really, really hard to get a new ND. So great timing to ensure that those concepts are incorporated in what we're doing as this district grows. So a challenge on that front, but also some positives to it.
Yeah, and it'll probably come up later again when we talk about the recommendations for the North End. So I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just have one quick comment before, if anyone's asking someone to move the motion. You know, I think starting in this manner with the committee, working towards developing the plan are the first steps. And then hopefully that plan will give us an idea of the actions and goals that we want to achieve that then we can use for future budgeting and or advocacy or capital request or what have you. So I see that Trustee Burzovich would like to move the motion. So if you'd like to read it, Trustee Burzovich, go ahead, please.
Just give me half a sec to find it here. I do have it.
Mr. Chair, I do not believe that there's a recommended motion associated with this item.
No.
My apologies. I was reading ahead to our next item. My apologies.
Yeah, I was getting confused too. I couldn't find it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this is
Thanks
just
for the
update.
clarification. With that said, I don't see any other questions in the chat or anyone wanting to speak. So I will thank you, Mr. Johnston, again for your presentation, and I look forward to seeing this work in the near future.
Thank you, Chair.
So we'll move on to item 8.2, Mr. Walsh with the minor capital plan submission.
Thank you, Chair. And so this evening, the first item this evening, there's a recommended motion associated with it. And Mr. Bakewell is here along with me, who has done much of the work planning this. So just want to express appreciation at the outset. So what we're seeing here is a continuation of the ministry's capital application process. And so just like last year, they split minor capital and major capital. And they do that because minor capital is a little bit easier to get approved. So we'll get a sense of when we can start going to tender to get things moving quicker on minor than on major. So as a reminder, the minor capital is a school enhancement program. And so when we get to those items, you'll see they can be a variety of things to enhance the functionality of schools, carbon neutral capital programs. So that was pretty clear. Environmental upgrades to lower GHG emissions for the most part, and playground enhancement. So the ministry is supporting, usually typically one a year, playground upgrades at schools, and the bus replacement program. So when you do look at this, the plan, you'll see we've ensured that we've aligned the long-range facilities plan priorities within this document. And so in the memo, it highlights a variety of things that we're focusing on and how they relate to what we're recommending to be seeking in the submission. So I'll start with the school enhancement program. And so you'll see cedar dust extractor. So again, health and safety from an enhancing our system, it's not a system on its last legs. Well, it's getting there, but certainly we're trying to stay on top of that, as we have with all of our air quality issues in this district, been a real leader in that in the province. Number two, the Ladysmith Secondary School washroom replacement. So we often hear from a variety of people, well, we give you input at budget time about the things that are meaningful and priority to us. And so one of the things that we heard from a great deal, actually, from particularly our students, but not just our students, was the condition of many of our bathrooms and the layout of many of our bathrooms. And so here is a fairly significant project that we're seeking at Ladysmith Secondary to upgrade those. The bathroom, I believe it's on the second floor. And so what we'd be looking to do likely is make a gender neutral bathroom, that has sight lines along the lines of Dover Bay, so floor to ceiling doors, like actual stalls, and then a lot more sight lines accessibility into the bathroom to try to tackle some of those issues that we do hear about. The next one is a bit of a missed opportunity, to be frank, but we want to make sure that we're doing this. And so the Solaire exterior windows. So when everyone gets a tour through a newly lovely refreshed interior of Solaire, the exterior will be painted but not significantly upgraded. The interior, though, it looks great, except for it's got old windows still, because it's not part of the Seismic program. And so we're trying to go back to get those done if we can. So Fairview, a similar project. And then you'll see Cedar Elementary band room renovation. So then you'll notice 6 through 15 are essentially making a point. We have got support to proceed with Ladysmith Intermediate Seismic. Well, we want to replace that school in one way or another, as we'll talk about here soon. So we're telling the ministry here are the multiple projects that the school are at the end of their last legs. So really, we don't want approval for these. We're telling the ministry the school is done. It needs to be replaced. And so very similar to ND in that regard. So when we go and ask about ND in a moment, when we talk about major capital, they give us 70 million or whatever that number is to do the seismic of ND. Well, we'd say, well, the boiler is this and the floors are this and the siding is this. And if you add it all up, it's cheaper to build a new school. And so again, it's part of our partially recognizing the need, but also partially part of our advocacy at an administrative level, but as well, of course, the board is passing or being asked to pass this plan. Carbon neutral, you'll see Brecken boilers. We're seeking to go to heat pump issue. And so there we go. Very positive GHG emission impact. And then we've repeated Solaire and Fairview windows because, again, they actually apply to both the SEP and the carbon neutral. So we're relatively confident that we'll move on the Solaire issue. And then you'll see Pauline Herrera is there. And then Randerson boilers. We don't ask for much more than 5 because it's unlikely that we're going to get much more than 2, and it does take some work to get this done. And then you'll see a list of the playground equipment that's there and the bus replacement program. And so this year, normally we wouldn't be asking for 2 buses likely based off of the age and mileage, but we're close. And given our commitment to move to electrification, that's why we do anticipate applying for a few more this year. So happy to answer any questions, but that is the minor capital submission that we are seeking board approval to submit to the ministry.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Walsh. I don't see anyone on our speakers list, but I have a question. And this question also somewhat pertains to the next item on our agenda as well. Every year, the district puts together a very comprehensive request for capital. And, there's only so much money at the provincial level to go around. So my question is, of those projects that do not receive funding from the province, that for the next year, do we go back to the province and request those projects again, or are those ones just off the table till some unknown later date? And how are those tracked?
So it's, well, they're definitely tracked. It's a little bit of both. So for the majority of them, and major capital, I'll talk about some specific areas, I could talk about them now, that might shift. So for instance, expansions, we might realize, oh, wait, enrollment's changing there in a downward way or an upward way. And so they get moved up or down or taken off the list as priorities. Seismic is actually very similar. So for instance, we might say, oh, my departure bay needs an expansion. So we better move the seismic to the top because we're seeking them at the same time, because it would be an absurd result to, have project 1 in one year and project 2 in another. So that might do the shifts. some of the feedback, again, that we hear from kids. So Ladysmith Intermediate is an example. And also sometimes the board manages to scrape together some surplus and support some environmental upgrades. It might mean that they don't need to be asked for again because we managed to do it. So I can't recall exactly how many are repeated year to year. I'm not going to put Mr. Bakewell on the spot because he might not have that in front of him, but that's essentially the way it goes. So for instance, when we don't, and I can predict we are not going to get the Randerson boiler upgrade, you should be seeing the Randerson boiler upgrade next year move up one rung unless there's another priority that's come on top.
Thanks, Mr. Walsh. No, that was what I was looking for, is to say, you know, if we don't get that ask this year, how we deal with it on the next ask. And what I heard was, for the most part, unless priorities change, those are bumped up on the list next year.
Yeah, and we made a fairly major revamp last year, I believe, based off of the fact that the long-range facilities plan kind of came into its own, as well as the fact that we've kind of have our own administrative strategy with respect on how we're going to lobby ND and how we were going to lobby for LIS, and it's seemingly working, hopefully. And so last year to this, there shouldn't have been major shifts.
Thank you. So we do have a comment from Trustee McKay.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out, where do I fit this into this evening? There's 4 items on our agenda this evening that have gone through the process of being discussed at the Long Range Facilities Plan Committee. And so I just wanted to offer my thanks at the committee level to all of our partner groups, as well as all of the staff that participate in that Long Range Facilities Plan Committee. We've had some really good in-depth discussions on a lot of these items at that committee level, and it's had a great influence on the products that you see before you this evening around major and minor capital, as well as the consultation pieces. So just on behalf of the board, to everyone who participates in those committees, thank you very much for your ongoing participation, and look forward to getting together again next year and seeing how else we can monitor that plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anybody like to move the motion at this point? I don't see any other questions in the chat. Trustee McKay?
Thanks. That the Business Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, in accordance with provisions under Section 142(4) of the School Act, approve the proposed minor capital plan for 2023-2024 as provided, to be submitted to the Ministry of Education.
Do we have a seconder? Trustee Higginson, would you like to second that? There's another trustee. Yes, Trustee Higginson seconded that motion. Thank you. Back to Trustee McKay. Would you like to motivate the motion?
Sure. Just briefly to say that I think that the board, as well as the Long Range Facilities Plan Committee, have done a really good job of outlining what the capital needs are in our school district right now. And so I hope that these projects are received well at the ministry level and that we see support through some ministry financing for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee McKay. Any discussion on the motion? I don't see anything in the chat, so I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to item 8.3, Mr. Walsh with the 5-year major capital plan.
Great, thank you, Chair. And so again, here we are with major capital with on page 41, there's a listing of the variety of programs within major capital, and we should draw a line under building envelope, because in fact the last 4 on that first page are actually minor capital. So seismic, school expansion, school replacement, rural district, and building envelope. So we as a district have been incredibly successful in our building envelope applications over the last number of years. And so it's an area to express appreciation for ministry support, but also starting to cross the finish line on that particular one. So what we have here, and you'll see very purposeful connections between all of the various major capital programs. And so it's a bit of a description of how they came to be on the list. So again, filtered through the long-range facilities plan, priorities, as well as filtered through so example, if we need an expansion at a school, well, then let's put the seismic on there at the same time. So one kind of forces the other one. So as part of the long range facilities plan, one of the commitments is to try to get as much work done at the same time if we're going to cause inconvenience as possible. So we're not looking at coming back, as in the Solaire example, and applying for windows the year after we had all the kids out of the school to do the seismic. So the site acquisitions have not changed year to year. And in reality, we're not going to get specific funding for those until there's specific approvals for the projects. And so those are relatively flexible. However, they do continue to reflect the 10-year growth data that we've received from our consultants that we based our school site acquisition fees or charge on. So under expansion, you will see Ladysmith Intermediate, ND, Departure Bay, Ladysmith Primary, Cole North Oyster, and Chase River. Now you will see it when we get to the final report of the evening. We're covering our bases by including Ladysmith, all the Ladysmith and North Oyster schools as part of the expansion, because we intend to hopefully create a concept plan that's going to address all those issues. ND, of course, is sitting at going to 1,700 kids next year. It's our largest population at ND in 40 years, since 1989, when it was 1112 for its final year as 1112, and may well end up being the largest it's been in its history, although I don't have data from the 60s. And so we're not trying to build the school to be 1,700, but we do realize that if we have the opportunity to build a new school, that we do need to address that particular issue. Probably not quite that big, but bigger. And then you'll see in year 4 or 5, there's just a variety of schools, and not a lot of work's been done on them, because really this is just our kind of highlight to the ministry. Hey, look, here's what our immediate enrollment projections are suggesting for a few years. And so that's what you just need to be aware that's coming. We've got our eyes on learning alt, of course, because of the Tuxton interest, as well as we're starting to look at Wellington and wonder what the potential implication for some of these numbers are there as well. But those are not going to be funded by the ministry. Clearly, we're not going to get 6 projects, but certainly we are encouraging LIS and ND at the very minimum. Second is replacement, and so you'll see ND is both on the replacement as well as the seismic, as well as the expansion. Again, we're sending a message. The school is past its due date, and we need to do something about it. And then seismic, and so seismic, they're all chosen. So ND, Departure Bay, Cole North Oyster, Ladysmith Primary are largely chosen because they align with the kind of immediate priorities of the school district from an expansion perspective, replacement perspective. Then you will look at a Cole, Pauline Hare, Gabriola, Brecken, Mountain View, Cedar. And so we're looking at those particular ones next to say, well, if they're small in value, and you have a little bit of money left over, I know that doesn't seem to be happening right now, but if they did, you can support us and we can move quickly, as well as it provides a geographic representation of our school district. Group 2 is so these reassessed H1s. Group 3 and you'll see with the addition projects in the 2022-23 capital plan, so that idea that we might need additional space, so we're going to prioritize them from a seismic perspective as well. Group 3 is just no request for expansion in those particular years, so the focus is not going to be on them because we don't really foresee us getting group 3 seismic, that we would take up the entire provincial capital budget in the ministry if we got all of our asks. And then of course the closed schools, which we may well end up changing that given another report that's coming up here pretty quick with respect to Rutherford, and for next year that would change and put that on the seismic list. So happy to answer questions, but that is the capital plan. And again, thank you to Mr. Bakewell for his work on this. And this is the year that is going to be the full court press on ND, assuming this motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. It's great to hear that we're taking such a strategic and synergistic approach to our facilities, at least our major, well, both our minor and our major capital project requests this year. So thank you for that. We do have a question. First one on the list is Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. Thanks for the update, and thank you for answering the question I sent in your report. That's awesome. My other question, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty here. When I read this report, there's lots of talk of portables. Dover 12, Randerson, I think somewhere there was 15 at ND, the possibility of the need under sort of when we're talking about expansion. And I'm wondering if we explore the use of porta packs. Being a teacher in Ontario, we were very familiar with these, it's actually a classroom unit. So 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 classrooms that you just put up against the school so that students actually avoid the weather to get to and from. They're a lot easier than having a bunch of individual portables. Is this something that we explore or have explored, knowing that we have this sort of, it allows us to sort of expand and contract as needed as opposed to just expand?
So I'm going to, through Mr. Chair, I'm going to start, and maybe Kelsey wants to participate, and if you don't have further, that's fine. One of the long-range facilities plan recommendations was the idea, not of exactly that concept, but the idea of creating almost an annex that we know is semi-permanent, because we're not going to get the funding for expansion. We haven't specifically sought that or contemplated that in the context of expansion projects, because when the ministry gives you the money, they're going to give you the money for a full stick build. So we put you remember the handy dandy chart, we put a little yield sign in the long range facilities plan, because our position was, in reality, if we have to pay for that ourselves, we just don't think we're going to have the resources to do it. So I don't think that we would have any issue if the ministry was supportive of a flexible model like that, but I'm not sure we've contemplated. I'm not sure, Mr. Bakewell, you have anything further to add to that? No, okay. So maybe we can take that away, but I'm not sure it aligns with the kind of way that the ministry requires their, like, at least from a ministry funding perspective, if we got ND expansion, we are stick building ND in a permanent way.
Do you mind if I just have a follow-up quickly?
You go right ahead.
Thank you. So my follow-up to that would be, I'm more thinking about those times where we need, like, we pay for portables out of our operating that we transfer to capital, because everything needs to be really confusing. So if I'm more talking about the instances where we're going to have to start paying for those portables, and for us to use the foresight or to think through, like, think ahead a bit. And I hear what you're saying. So if we buy a porta pack, we're almost sort of eliminating the need for the ministry to then provide us with the building. But I'm just thinking about, when I look at some of these numbers, that it might be something that we consider doing instead of just stacking portable on portable on portable. It's another alternative to portables.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and again, well taken, particularly given the fact that not the exact concept, but close to that, is a recommendation in the LRFP. However, I will say that, again, we're going to see 2 reports here at the end of the agenda that are both a goal of eliminating portables. So if we ever had, the Ladysmith example, if we could solve our capacity issues there, we're going to have 10 portables to redistribute throughout the district. When Hammond Bay is going to be finished, we're going to have some. So hopefully we're not looking at portable purchases for quite some time because of that realignment. But when they do realign, it does make a lot of sense to try to make them as friendly to our kids and to our land as possible by putting them as close together. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. So I don't see anybody else in the chat. Would somebody like to move the motion? I see Trustee Higginson. Would you like to read the motion?
Certainly. So the Business Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Lady Smith, in accordance with provisions under Section 1424 of the School Act, approve the proposed 5-year capital plan for the 2023-24 as provided on the 5-year capital plan summary for 2023-24 submitted to the Ministry of Education and Childcare.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Seconded by Trustee McKay. Would you like to motivate the motion, Trustee Higginson?
I just want to echo what you said earlier about the synergy between the minor and the major capital plans and the long range facilities plan. I have a lot of gratitude to staff for doing that. And also to say that it's, you know, having been at this role now for 7 or 8 years, it's nice to be in a position where we're seeing growth, both operationally and from a capital perspective. It's a really, it's an encouraging position for us to be in. So despite a lot of the use of the word portable, I appreciate our staff's proactive attempt to be thoughtful about looking out for our student needs with this submission. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? So I don't see anything in the chat, so I'll call the question on the motion. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8.4. Mr. Walsh, with an information on an emergent bus issue.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so just wanted to bring the board's attention and to have it in the public record that as with many other areas in the school district, as well as the greater community, we are facing some human resource challenges with respect to ensuring that we have sufficient bus drivers to serve our kids in all of our routes in timely fashion. So we are doing a few things to try to address this. So we are trying to create kind of more fulsome positions, as well as so to attract people and maintain them. So like combination positions where the bus drivers are doing busing and then doing other items in between. We're also working on recruitment and advertising is happening in a robust fashion. But we still are somewhat worried that we could end up at a time next year where if we have, you know, we've been facing failure to fills in our EAs, in our clerical, in our teachers on some days, and we're able to cover in a way within the school that's not ideal, but certainly is safe and still conducive to learning. Buses are a bit different because we've got kids to pick up and we've got kids to drop off and they're expecting to be certain times. So we are a little bit worried about this generally, and we just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. No actions being taken right now, but some of the things that we might have to look at are, you know, do we collapse 2 routes into 1? So the impact, of course, would be longer waits or longer rides for kids or waiting longer at the school to be picked up, which is not ideal. We do have some courtesy riders that we may, and a courtesy in the sense of we're confident both the walk route is safe as well as they are inside the walk limit. So that doesn't include kids within the walk limit, but without safe walk routes to schools. And so we could look at some of that perhaps to change. And so again, nothing to happen now, just wanted the board to be well aware that this is an issue that we're trying to address, but there is some concerns. Thank you for your report, Mr. Walsh. We do have a number of questions from trustees in the chat. I believe the first, well, you're already on my screen, Trustee Berzovic. I'll let you go ahead, but technically Trustee Higginson is ahead of you.
No, let her go first. My apologies.
It's okay. You're on there now.
I was just really going to say that I appreciate getting this information early. I think this is the kind of thing that parents can be very concerned about, and knowing that we are aware of it and that staff is proactively taking steps to try to address the problem, I think is very important. So, and I just think openness about these issues is vital. So kudos to staff for bringing it forward and letting the board know that this is a concern so that we can support you in trying to address it.
Thank you, Trustee Berzovic. So the next on our list is Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. Thanks for the update on the issue. I'm wondering, in our recruitment drive, I appreciate you talking about, trying to sort of create more fulsome positions. I'm wondering in our recruitment drive, if one, we offer the opportunity to pay for the training of bus drivers, and two, if we've thought about this as not necessarily, where possible, creating full-time positions for folks, but also if this is, I remember this happening, another Ontario reference, sorry for those tonight, happening once in Ontario and where I was when I was teaching, and the school district actually targeted people who were retiring from the district, paid for their training, and people really appreciated the limited hours and the flexibility of the job. So I'm just wondering if we offered a pay for training and if we've thought about this from a different perspective as well in terms of what we can offer. This is such an important service that we offer to students, the first person and the last person they see every day. So making sure that we can have as much consistency in busing routes is really important for families who depend on it.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Mowat is here tonight as well, so she might want to jump on. But I think this is one of those everything is on the table discussions at this point to try to solve that. I don't think we have actually formally offered any funding for training at this time, but I know we've had a few discussions about it. But Tracy, I don't know if you're available to jump on for a moment to provide any further information.
Yeah.
And
Hi.
Tracy, you've been on before, right?
Yes.
Maybe I could just get you to introduce yourself.
Yeah,
Just
okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Mowat, Manager of Transportation. I've been here almost a year now, so I'm getting really close to my anniversary. So yes, we've been working a lot with human resources, having several conversations about some of the items that we can do to help with recruitment. Certainly these ideas of offering training and stuff are on the table. We've been looking at, our job description and what we're actually asking for, and, changing some of the language to ideas of, preferred experience versus absolute necessary. So some of those things that, they have to have the proper license, but, they may not have as much as the 2 years experience that we ask for. So things like that, we're looking at all those options to really try to attract people, because yeah, it is difficult, particularly because we bring them on first off as a casual. And so that's where we're talking about those positions where we're trying to make the, the full-time positions, because it is difficult for people to come on and only have unguaranteed work. It has been really difficult. So yeah, so we're trying all these angles. We're working together, like I say, with HR to hopefully come up with some solutions. Thank
you. Trustee Higginson, would you like a follow-up?
No, just to say thank you for all the efforts. It's nice to see you again, Tracy, and thanks for explaining some of the hurdles that we have to overcome as well to this. And also just to say that, I don't want to diminish the importance of the skill involved by talking about offering to pay for training. I know this is a really important, critical role, and the accident that we had this year showed how important defensive driving techniques are in this role. So thanks to staff for trying to be proactive on this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our next speaker is Trustee Bailey. Trustee Bailey, there we are.
Yeah, thank you. I actually, I had one of Mark and Ms. Mowat actually explained. I was saying about, hiring. I know that in the past there's, drivers have worked, done the morning shift and then they're off and then they have to go back and do the afternoon shift. And it's not an ideal way to work or, earn a living that you can live on. So it's really good to hear that we're looking at like full-time positions, and I like the idea of the training piece, like maybe paying for it. I can tell you with a little bit of expertise that it's about $2,500 for a person to take their class 2 to get their bus drivers training. So it sounds really good, and of course I'm a really big believer in the bus system. I've had a few letters from parents upset about their kids taking public transportation and having to, you know, cross roads and take 2 buses and blah, blah, blah. So I would love to see, in the ideal world, if we could go back in time where we had buses dropping kids off instead of 300 cars at a school. So anyways, thanks for your good work. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Trustee Bailey. So I don't see any other comments in the chat. So barring that, no one in the chat, we'll move on to our next item. 8.5, Mr. Walsh, Board Governance Committees, 2 policies.
Great. So thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm here with a recommended motion flowing from the policy committee, and I'll try to represent some of the proposed changes to the best of my ability, and I'm sure the policy committee members may want to jump in as well. So what the board is being asked with respect to this evening is to go to public consultation on relatively significant revamp of the board's governance policies. So currently there's 3. There's 2.5, there's 2.51P, and 2.6. I don't know what the history of got named 2.5.1P, but it was the kind of how the board works actually at a meeting. 2.6 was less about the meetings and how generically it works, and then 2.5 is committees and representation. So 2.5 in the changes is relatively minor changes in the scheme of things. So we've followed a new, the kind of new template that says, okay, well, here is our, here's the kind of statement. So the purpose and then the objective, definitions if required, and there isn't any definitions in 2.5. And then actually, you know, essentially what the policy is going to do or is doing. So much of it is cut and paste from the previous policy, but just want to point out a couple things are mentioned in the memo. So in addition to kind of outline what the committees are, the subcommittees, the ad hoc committees, we've actually taken the line from 2.5.1P that highlights the role of our partners. So Leaders for Learning and unions and associations, ENSA, and highlights that in 2.5 to say, okay, here's their important role, and highlighting it particularly at the committee. So the voice without a vote, because I know that's something that there's been some interest in encouraging at the table. So we rolled that into 2.5 out of 2.5.1P. The other thing is that the board has been very effective in having a work plan. And so, you know, there's often things that we want to talk about, and then that might fill up the agenda. And so we go to our work plan and we realize, well, we're actually going to see it in 2 months. And so great, we're going to postpone it, and everybody knows when that issue is going to come about. So rather than creating our own board work plan, we've actually incorporated the concept of a board work plan into 2.5, and then it's reflected throughout the new 2.6, which we'll get to in a moment. And then noted that the membership in external committees is maintained. So again, note that's relatively minor shifts to 2.5, but when we get to 2.6, it's a major change. So I suspect, though, that the changes won't change too much about how the board actually functions, but is hoped to provide clarity and to create a document that's short enough that allows people to get a really good grasp on what it says. So, and I'm just sorry to read from the memo a little bit, but I think it's useful. So one of the biggest ones is we've essentially cut out all of the rules that are laid out in that policy have been largely cut. And that's for 2 reasons. Because the board at the beginning of the current policy, and adopted and recommended in this one, say we are going to use Robert's rules for our meetings. And then we had this policy that laid out a whole bunch of Robert's rules and then a whole bunch of changes to Robert's rules. And so when you're trying to really get a grasp on your parliamentary procedure, because every trustee does that after every meeting, you you really have to go back and forth so many times between books. So if you're attracting people to be new trustees and they're used to Robert's rules and they come in, we had so many glosses on top of them, and I'm sure they were for good reason over time. But you know, we took some of the kind of staff expertise from what we've seen the board and some of the places the board's got hiccups in process and tried to say, okay, you know what, just cut it. Robert's rules it will be, unless we're specific in maintaining something different, and I'll get to a couple of the differences just in a moment. The second one is if for again, I'm sure good reason, the policy 2.5.1 piece separated the committee, the way a committee operates and the way that the board operates. And there are continuing to be differences. But what we've done is, rather than have, here's the way the committee operates 3 pages long, here the way the board meeting operates 3 pages long, we've merged them and just highlighted with an asterisk where the board does something slightly different, because it's more likely to be something additional to what the committee does. And so we think that it's going to provide clarity as well. We've made a statement that, you know, we recognize that Robert's rules and the structures that we have are colonial in nature, but making a commitment to reducing barriers to participation by rights holders. And we anticipate that that's the kind of thing that will be like a little bit of the policy can grow as we start to determine what those barriers are as we go through it. We've specifically talked about electronic meetings, providing some flexibility. We were careful not to make everything all or nothing, because, you know, there may be a circumstance where the business committee regularly meets online, but all of a sudden we decide that, oh, you know what, we haven't been to Gabriola in a while, we're going to have a business committee at Gabriola, and we just can't figure out the technology, so maybe it has to be in person, as an example. So we've aligned starting times for our meetings and when we don't actually meet. We also changed from 2.6 to 2.51 to 2.5 what items would be addressed in the closed sessions of the board. And we've also added something that I think is important for trustees to be aware of. So when we talk about what happens in a closed session, we talk about, you know, land and labor, so people, where it's going to, you know, where those things are going to happen. And the Local Government Act actually lays out, so the municipalities have a very, very strict requirement on what they can discuss in closed. The school act is actually not as restrictive as what the municipalities are with respect to closed. So the board actually can make a determination that something's of such public interest that typically it wouldn't be in closed, but it can be. And so the new policy aligns with the school act in that fashion. It addresses, as I mentioned, the work plan throughout the document. And so this is essentially empowering the chair of business or ed or the board to be able to kind of say, you know, Trustee Smith comes and says, well, I really want coal mining on our September meeting. It's fundamental. You know, the program's getting shoddy, I want to report. And we go, no, we're going to report on coal mining in November and again in May. And so we're just going to have you wait. And so that's the kind of the nod to really keeping up with our work plan. So a couple of environmental things to highlight. We're not going to print everything. We're also ensconcing or recommending to ensconce in the policy how our correspondence is dealt with. So, you know, a new trustee comes on and goes, well, wait a sec, we got a letter from Mr. Smith about the coal mining program. What's going to happen? And then it outlines the different options so the trustees know as well as the public. We also putting right in the document that if we're going to have a public presentation, there is discretion on the part of the chair to actually refuse access if there's going to be a harm to staff or students. And so we can think of some of the SOGI presentations that might go around the province that we think might cause that harm. We might be able just to say no. And then the last one is actually where is a difference, and it's one of the differences from Robert's rules that sounded like the board valued, at least from what I could tell from hearing you, and that's the idea that the failure to vote on a motion is an affirmative vote, and the abstention, which is a positive action, is a negative vote. So you get up and you're stretching away from the table and the vote happens and you meant to vote, we're going to take you as a positive, an affirmative. So that's just put there in policy to reflect, because there has been some bit of confusion on that. Doesn't have to stick because it's not really Roberts in that regard, but it's there. So sorry to speak so long, but that's the highlights of the recommended changes. The idea would be is that it goes to 30-day public consultation with the intention of these being put into place in time for the new board. So when we're doing orientation, when we're planning orientation and training, we're able to incorporate these changes. And so I don't know if Chair McKay has anything to add, but.
Yes, Chair McKay does have something to add, so please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg, and thanks, Mark, for that really good explanation of where we've been on this policy, these two policies in particular. One of the things I guess I just wanted to highlight, maybe two things, is the policy committee along with Karen and Mark, and Karen and Mark, to be clear, did a lot of this work after reflecting on the practices of the current board and put together the initial draft for the policy committee to take a look at. So thank you to you both for that amount of work that went into that. I know it was not a small undertaking. I think the most important thing that I was taking away after our policy committee discussions was I guess a combination of wanting to simplify for clarity, knowing that there'll be a new board coming in, and that's important because understanding how we do our business is probably one of the first hurdles that you have to overcome when you first come on as a trustee, and to do the work in a way that everybody understands that they're doing the same things in the same way. And the second was that it does align with practices. There were things in our policies that actually hadn't been practiced in as many boards as I've been around for 3 terms now. There was things written in policy that I'd actually never seen practiced. So to be able to see those policies up to date with how we actually currently undertake our work, I think was really important. And the second thing I just wanted to highlight for trustees is that the policy committee has one more meeting scheduled for the remainder of this school year. And our sole purpose is to be able to reflect upon the feedback that happens this evening at the business committee. And if there's any feedback that you'd like to see implemented into the draft prior to the 30-day consultation, we will have that opportunity to do that work next week. And so should the motion get moved, seconded and passed this evening, we will incorporate the feedback that we hear back from trustees if there is feedback that you feel is important for us to include. So we've made sure that we've been able to be responsive to that in a tight timeline, seeing that we're at the end of the year. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee McKay, and I echo your comments, thanking staff and the members of the policy committee for the work on this so far. And I do see that we have a comment from Trustee O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. And I just might be breaking some rules right now, actually realizing there is no motion, but just to echo a bit, this task was probably a real daunting one. And so, you know, my thanks and gratitude to the committee and the staff who worked through this. From my perspective, what a great way to sort of end our time before, you know, moving into the summer months. And yes, this idea of a new board, existing members coming on and having a more up-to-date policy that I'll just call is more user-friendly, quite honestly. And I also want to especially acknowledge and I don't know how to word this except to say the acknowledgement that this is a colonial structure, and that, you know, this board, from what I've seen and participated in, is trying to tackle some of those systemic barriers. And this I see as one of those starting points, and that ability to be more flexible moving forward in all the work that we do. So thank you for this hard work, and I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Trustee O'Neill, for your kind words. Moving on to Trustee Higginson.
Thanks, Chair. So just a quick question. I think I heard this, but I just want to make sure that I saw clarity because my internet was doing, it made Chair McKay look like Darth Vader. It was all robot-y. Was just that there is an opportunity this, you know, if the recommendation gets moved and approved, goes out to consultation, then trustees have the ability then during that period to provide our input, ask our questions around some of the changes, seek clarity, and then that may or may not be included in the final one that comes forward after the consultation. Is that what I just heard?
Trustee McKay.
Thanks. So our goal is to take trustee feedback this evening, and even either here now or we meet next Wednesday. So you could take the next couple of days, provide us some, I think that's the 15th perhaps. Provide us an email. If you send me an email with feedback on these policies as well, then we can take that feedback, look at how we can incorporate the feedback into the draft that will be put out for 30-day consultation. And then we'll come back after that consultation period and collect even more feedback from trustees, the committee, our partner groups as well, and then say, what does our final draft look like? So there is an opportunity to adjust the draft before it goes out at the end of the month.
Okay, so 2 clarification questions on your question. I don't have anything in my agenda for June 15th, so I'm not sure what I missed there.
No, policy
the
committee
policy
meets.
committee meets.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, and in light of that, I mean, I do have questions and I do have feedback on what I've read, but I'm also aware that we have a very long agenda tonight. So I think in order to be expedient and allow us the right amount of time for each agenda item, I will provide my feedback to you in a different way and hope it gets included. So thank you for the work on this, much needed and overdue, and look forward to furthering the conversation on it.
Thank you, Trustee Higginson and Trustee McKay. Would you mind staying on, Trustee McKay? I see that Trustee Brzovic has a question and you might be the one that is best to answer it.
Yes. And my apologies in advance, Trustee McKay, because we actually had a brief conversation about this, and I don't remember what you told me. When I asked you about the 2 ideas we discussed in our meeting about changes we can implement in practice, which I actually would not want to do this late in our term, how do we bring those forward? Would that be better to be doing that now, or as part of the consultation process, or yeah?
I think some of the discussions that were brought forward probably should come through the consultation process. Okay. I almost would advise, this is just my opinion on this, but I think that revising to the point of being reflective of what we practice and how we practice right now is probably the best way that we can leave this. I think to suggest major changes in practice, which I think some of those discussions were about, is probably better left for an incoming board to discuss. What practices do you like? Like, here's the structures that we have. What practices do you like? And allow them to work through that process as a part of their governance discussions and training when they first become onboarded.
I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably the best way for succession for, given that we're in election year. That's my suggestion, not to say that the board can't have other conversations, you know, leaving a legacy of maybe of, you know, what we might suggest other people talk about it at a later time as well.
Okay, thank you. Maybe that's how I'll do it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So I don't see anybody else in the chat. Would someone like to move the motion? Trustee McKay.
I just have to find it. Sorry. Let's see. Okay. The business committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, receive the updated board governance policies 2.5, role of committees and representatives, and 2.6, board meeting procedures, and circulate as a notice of motion for 30 days, utilizing the consultation process as per board governance, section 1, 2.7, policy development.
Thank you, Trustee McKay. We do have a seconder. I believe that would be Trustee Bailey. She got in just before you, Trustee Brzovic. So thank you. So the motion's been seconded. Would you like to motivate the motion, Trustee McKay?
Thank you. Yes. I think that we've landed at a really good point to start with our consultation piece. I am quite interested to hear what the public thinks about the changes, because the one looks quite significant in different. We've dropped many pages, but it actually makes it easier to read. And that was sort of one of our bigger goals. And then I also would like, I guess I support this because it incorporates a lot of the ideas that our board had around things like a board annual work plan and things like that. It incorporates it in a way that still allows us to be flexible in that creation of that plan with an ongoing monitoring piece of that as well. And I think that's actually a really important addition for succession planning and just longevity of how the board operates and does its work. I think we've created a couple of documents here that will support good governance. And I believe that good governance does provide an opportunity to support students in our school system and allows us to make good decisions. So I support this motion and I appreciate all the work that went into it and the feedback and discussion questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion's been seconded. Any other discussion? And I'll just speak briefly in support of the motion and echo much of Trustee McKay's comments. I believe that this was a good start, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from our getting public feedback on these particular policies. So I don't see any other comments in the chat. So I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 8.6, Mr. Walsh, North End consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the agenda, starting on page 66, is a staff report with respect to the outcome with some recommendations of the consultation that we began quite some time ago with board direction to address capacity issues in the North End. So just for background, Mr. Burgos and his team organized a relatively robust consultation framework that involved online survey, that involved email feedback, that involved virtual open house. We were available, we did some videos, we were available for individual meetings. We didn't actually have a great amount of demand with respect to that. So as a result, though, you will see the feedback that we heard, and I think perhaps unsurprisingly, because I know that the Rutherford folks are quite a passionate group, we're really pushing for the reopening of the school. So you recall, when we look at the options that we had put forward, the option of reopening Rutherford, moving Frank J. Nay's boundary east and south, I suppose, to take Departure Bay's catchment down. We proposed the possible option of a new school in the Stevenson Point, Oak Ridge area. We proposed dual tracking Hammond Bay Elementary and creating a regular program, an English program catchment area, so east of Frank Nay to take some of Departure Bay, as well as allow Frank Nay a little bit of room for growth. And we suggested the expansion of Departure Bay to take care of its overcapacity. So just to step back, as we know, Frank Ney is at capacity, but it's got room. Hammond Bay is expanding, and we'll be able to help Frank Ney, Departure Bay, Rutherford, McGirr, and other schools over the next couple of years as it fills up. It's approximately 130 odd empty spaces and won't have portables. McGirr has a number of portables. Randerson has portables and no room for more portables. Departure Bay has 5. And so we put that out with all the information with respect to the condition of the facilities, the potential capital cost of having to expand or build, etc., the likelihood of how long delivery would take, etc. And we put a little bit of a matrix to say, well, adding all these factors, of course, with the subjective and subjective numbers added to them, here's where they come out. We kind of threw away the new school concept pretty early, given the unlikelihood of being able to deliver that in a reasonable amount of time, given the really quick growth that we're projecting, particularly in the area, and then started to focus on the other areas. The Hammond Bay dual track was actually the highest, or sorry, I guess on paper the one that seemed like the best option. But a number of things arose, and the community's demand for French immersion was very, very clear. I think there's no doubt about that. I think that the educational argument, at least in our district, is that, dual track or single track is the preference. So although we do have a dual track, the single track option's there. And we do know, and it's very clear, that Hammond Bay will serve its purpose of, draining some kids away, at least in the short term, from our high demand schools to go to French immersion. And again, the part of consultation is listening to our community, and I think that this report largely reflects the input from our community as well. And so what you're going to see is 3 recommendations. The first recommendation is an immediate term one. It's an immediate term one that's going to have a longer term time to take impact. So we know that our data from our external consultant is showing Solaire shrinking in the next decade, one of the few schools to do so. So what we're suggesting is that we immediately, next fall, start the process of realigning the boundaries associated with Departure Bay South and Departure Bay West. So Rock City might take a little bit of Departure Bay, Solaire could take a little bit of Departure Bay, to shrink what that growth of the school is going to be in order to limit its population. But again, that takes about 8 years and makes Solaire's a little bit more robust. And so that starts to solve the problem at Departure Bay, or at least it prevents some of the future growth. We've also suggested in the community, there was a question, and I think, and I just wanted to do a mea culpa, that I'm not sure that when the report was drafted and perhaps presented, that the idea that we could take multiple strategies to solve our issue was there. And so again, thank you to the community feedback. We really wanted to highlight that we think multiple solutions are the way to solve our issue. And so we're still saying Departure Bay should have an expansion. What that number looks like, though, should not be expanding to meet its 2030 population without any other changes. So, we got 400 kids there right now with 5 portables, so why don't we try to expand to kind of get that population, we make the school right-sized, and then that's where we try to stick it at for a number of years. And then the final one is, I think the one that is the biggie, is of course the recommendation to reopen Rutherford. But what I do want to highlight is one of the things that came about, one of the trends we're seeing is that we're continuing to see growth, but we are seeing slightly slower growth in the North End this spring at our elementary level. And so what that means is that we think we actually have a little bit more time. So of course we do have portables at many of our sites, but one of the things is we're not recommending that we proceed to contemplate opening Rutherford for September 2023, because the opening of the school, and I want to be clear, depending on if we change the way schools are funded, like formulas to schools, and how much savings we have about, so if 100 kids leave Frank Ney as an example, then Frank Ney is going to have less clerical time and less administrative time and less of those things to partially subsidize the increase in costs of Rutherford. But we are saying that the cost on a year-to-year basis to open Rutherford is going to be between $450,000 and $650,000 of additional operating funds. By 2023, we actually don't think enrollment is going to pay for that. So the board would be faced with the idea of funding that by removing programming or lessening services to existing schools. So what we're suggesting is that we envision opening it in 2024 or 2025, depending on the growth pattern that we see, and we'll be able to base that at our September, like end of September, beginning of October numbers. So that's why you'll see not a recommendation that it would be 2023. And we also want time to be able to organize the opening. So is it kindergarten grade 1, kindergarten grade 1, grade 2? Is it K to 7 from the get-go? If it is, do we force kids to leave their homes, the schools they're currently at? Do we do it by a voluntary basis? How does that work? And the other thing is it's very important to this board that we know that Rutherford, if it does open, has a robust population for the long term, because the last thing we want to do is open a school that closed and then close a school that opened. And so in order to achieve that, however, we are going to probably, because the area immediately around Rutherford is actually not the area of significant growth, is we are going to have to create some boundaries that might actually cause some consternation amongst McGurr, Randerson, perhaps not Ney, but McGurr and Randerson families at least. So how we're going to capture future growth from Green Thumb, etc. And so we need to take our time to make sure that people are heard if it's going to be impacting them. And we can actually see situations where some families might have longer walks to school because we need to ensure that we're creating robust catchments to maintain that school's population. So with that, that's the basis of the recommendation. And I do want to just address a couple of issues. So for instance, the question about Rutherford Seismic. And so we haven't addressed that in too much depth. In our original consultation document, what we said was, well, in reality, Rutherford's going to need a seismic upgrade at some point. And of course, that's concerning. Why, hey, board, why would you open a school that needs seismic upgrading? And the reality is the vast majority of our schools require seismic upgrading. And so Rutherford is going to be high risk in the same way that many of our other schools are high risk. We would put it on our list the moment the board made its determination of the year of its opening, but we would not guarantee that the seismic will be done within 5 years. So that's important. With respect to its condition, when Rutherford closed, and I just want to acknowledge just a moment that the operating costs of a school are immense, and so they are just sunk costs into a school, and I know how important they are to neighborhoods, but the savings of a school that closed over the time that it's closed have been significant for the district to be able to reinvest in other areas. But now that, of course, our population is coming back and we're loath to increase the number of portables, we're seeing the need for more flex space in our schools. It's another reason to see the Rutherford recommendation the way that it is. With respect to its condition, one of the perhaps beneficial things that happened is that when we went to use Rutherford for Pleasant Valley this year, about $1 million was invested in that school. So it's a different school than when it closed from a condition perspective. So in fact, it's going to be in better condition than a number of our schools that we currently operate. And in a better FCI, Facilities Condition Index, than some of the schools that are actually even in its own kind of north end zone. So that's pretty important to note. So it's got a mechanical ventilation system. We've redid some boilers this year, so it's able to provide the air quality that we would require upon open, just like it was able to do that this year as well. We don't see significant operating costs. Significant operating costs. We don't see significant initial outlay costs for the school. So the idea though is when we get new classrooms, we typically kit them out, as divisions come up. And so if Frank Nay loses a division because Rutherford opens, we would anticipate that furniture would flow with them. McGirr would be the same way. And as it grows, we would anticipate kind of being able to support that. I think it's about 17,000 a classroom approximately that we spend. And so I think that's pretty much the high level of where it is, but I just want to acknowledge the positive feedback and the respectful manner in which this process was done, and just the sheer hard work of our communications team, our finance team, our facilities team, our learning service team, and in helping contemplate the recommendations that are coming to you this evening. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh, for your report this evening and all the previous ones as well. Do we have any trustees that have questions, or any of our stakeholder group members as well? If not, is there anyone who'd like to move the first motion? Oh, sorry, I do see, just before I read that, Trustee Berzovic.
I would actually love to remove the motion, but first I just want to ask Mr. Walsh something. In the recommendation piece around Departure Bay, in putting through the request to do the renovations, the changes to that school, do you think it would be viable or possible to, would parking be part of that? Could it be part of that? Because I'm thinking of accessibility. When I said earlier in the meeting that I could see connections between the accessibility request and this and later in the meeting, that was what I meant. Is there some serious accessibility questions at Departure Bay?
So through Mr. Chair, 100%. So we've talked about parking issues at that school, which is the reason that, 400 might even be pushing it, but certainly we couldn't be looking at capturing the entire population there. One of the things about trying to time an expansion at that school with Seismic is exactly like, if we cannot address accessibility at that school, then something has to be done. So if you know the school well, those back set of stairs, oh my word. And so we don't know the extent of what the Seismic could look like, but maybe the back end has to get rebuilt or torn down, or the expansion is going to be there, etc. Just it cannot exist like that. So not just the parking, but the inaccessibility, particularly of that rear wing of Prince John entrance, has to be addressed. And so, in fact, we're bringing local MLA there to get a sense. We're going to try to time it with rush or with pickup time this Friday. But yes, 100% that would be a priority in anything that we do. And we are looking at potential, site or property acquisition, but only if they become available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Would you like a follow-up, Trustee Berzovic?
Not at this time. I would like to move the recommendation when it's appropriate, but not right now.
Okay. Well, I see Trustee Higginson has a question, and if there's no more after that, I'll come back to you for the motion. Go ahead, Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. Thanks for the update and the thorough report. So I just want to seek some clarity. I actually have two questions and they're separate. So if there's a list, you can put me back on. But the first one is just to seek some clarity around what you said around the operating costs and how the board would sustain those operating costs. And I think what I heard from you is the reason for the deferred or delayed time period to 2024 or 2025 is that the hope is that increased enrollment by then would help offset those operating costs so that this district wouldn't be in either a structural deficit position or in a position, the board in a position of having to cut current programming in order to support this particular option.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so it's twofold. So one is the fact that we are slightly softer in enrollment, so the priority is not quite there. So we're not looking at needing a new portable this year at Randerson. We're not looking at a new portable at McGirr. We're not looking at a new portable at Nay. Hammond Bay opens. It's going to start to draw some kids away. So Departure Bay is looking at a new portable, so that problem hasn't ceased, but even their numbers are slightly softer. So if those numbers were higher, we would say, yikes, let's get on this, because we don't want to buy more portables. What a waste of money. And not fair to the kids if we need more space. So we have a little bit of time because of the softer number. So that's one. And then of course, two is this year, without the ESA hit, we would have been looking at a $900,000 kind of structural surplus from enrollment increase and international program increase. So some of that's international, but most of that's domestic students. But because the ESA ate up most of that, if we had to open that school this year, we would have had to cut $300,000 from something else in order to fund the open school. So the last thing we do want to do, the board chose to close the school for a very good reason, to be able to invest those dollars into education, like educational programming. So the last thing we would want to do is prematurely open a school, causing the board to have to cut programming. We want enrollment to support the need, like to support that school. We don't want resource reallocation to have to do that.
Trustee Higginson, I see there's no one else on the list, so do you want to just ask your separate question?
Yeah, thank you. So my other question is just seeking clarity on the seismic rating. And, you know, being one of the trustees who was around during this closure process, which was horrible and probably like the worst, one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make as a trustee. It was a glaringly obvious, or it stood out amongst our seismic requirements. And now you're saying that it's different, or it's actually would come out as being not as much seismic need as some others. And I'm just trying to seek some clarity on that. And is that because the seismic remediation guidelines changed since the closure process, and that's what has caused, because I remember we were so close to being off the seismic list, and then the SRG, the seismic remediation guidelines changed, and then a whole bunch of our schools went back on it. Is that because of that change that's happened?
Through you, Mr. Chair, exactly. So rather than having one school left that we're never going to get funding for because I don't know what the numbers were back then, but they were significantly lesser. Rather than having just a few left, the ministry's got to focus on some other school districts that had more than us. We're all of a sudden now, I think, the neediest school district from a seismic perspective. And so in reality, that list is so long that absolutely, is it a consideration? Seismic safety, yes. But ultimately you compare, you know, the amount of H1 schools we have is high. And so it's the apples have changed since then. So we can't compare 2016 from a seismic perspective because of the building code. It would be apples to oranges now. So.
Thank you, Trustee Higginson. Do you need a follow-up? I have a question that's related, actually, if I may. I'm just looking at our long-range facilities plan and hoping you could confirm that of the schools that have no H1 blocks in them, Rutherford is actually one of them. And when we look at that page in I believe it's page 9, but that doesn't necessarily mean, my question is, that doesn't mean that there aren't seismic issues that might have to get addressed, just not H1.
Through you too, Mr. Chair, apologies. I don't have the data in front of me, so if it would be okay, Mr. Bakewell is going to hurriedly look through the documentation. Well, if we could move on to the next question and come back to that, unless he's ready right now. Wow,
and it's okay. I can get an answer later too. That's okay. I don't need an immediate answer. I just was hoping to understand that perhaps the seismic upgrades that are required are not related to H1 blocks. I guess that was more my question.
And apologies, I may have misspoke, but Mr. Bakewell will come back and confirm that in a moment.
Okay, and I don't see we have any other questions, so I don't want to hold us up for that. So maybe what we could do is see if anyone would like to move the first motion, and if we have a mover, then we can address the first one. Oh, sorry, Trustee Berzovic, I had committed to coming back to you. I'm sorry. Go.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Chair, are these each 3 separate recommendations?
Yes.
Or are they all one motion?
I believe this should be 3 motion. Can I just confirm that with staff to make sure that I get this correct?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, I guess I would say that they can be separate or they could be together, but ultimately, for instance, if you didn't support number 3, we would still be recommending number 1, and if you didn't support number 1, we'd still be recommending number 3. So I think separately would be appropriate in the circumstances.
Thank you. So Trustee Berzovic,
Okay, I was
Right.
hoping to do it in 3, but that's okay. That staff draft proposed boundary changes for Solaire, Rock City, and Departure Bay Elementary Schools, with the potential of other minor boundary shifts that would shift students away from Departure Bay for review and approval in principle, followed by community consultation and implementation for September 2023. Any students currently enrolled in Departure Bay may retain their seat in the school, as well as younger siblings, or they may transfer to their applicable catchment school as per determined boundary changes.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Trustee Higginson, second the motion. Would you like to motivate the motion, Trustee Higginson or Trustee Berzovic?
Well, I think that as staff has said, I mean, we clearly have 2 different areas of the district that are facing issues. We know particularly that Departure Bay has portables and it has other issues that need to be addressed that we've discussed. We want to improve Solaire. This is just, it makes perfect sense, and it's again in line with the community, with what the community stated in the consultation. So I think this is the way to go.
Thank you. Trustee Higginson.
Thanks. I just really want to appreciate the proactive nature of this. I think there are a number of districts across the province where children cannot attend their catchment school. And there are waiting lists years long for that, and families have to drive their kids far away from their communities and their neighborhoods. And so I appreciate that we have not been put in that position yet, and that we are attempting to be proactive to avoid that. And I also appreciate that the motion does include the comment about students currently enrolled in the school. I think that's critical to allow communities to feel okay and to participate in any consultation without recognizing that their current spots may be at risk. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Trustee Higginson. Any other comments on the first motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Anyone opposed to the first motion? Seeing none, the motion carries. Is someone willing to read the second motion? Trustee Berzovic, you're on my screen. Are you volunteering?
Oh, I'm happy to, but I know.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's okay. We have Stephanie Higgins, or sorry, Trustee Higginson, who's also volunteered, and Trustee O'Neill. So, okay. Everyone's jumping up at the bit here.
I think that we're all a little confused because it was presented as a single motion in the agenda, but I can certainly understand the need to in seriatim the motions. So it makes sense. I appreciate what the Secretary Treasurer said about people's support for various parts of this. So motion 2, the Business Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 68 approve and adopt, that the district continue to apply for expansion at Departure Bay in the 2023-24 capital plan with the intention of replacing portable usage at the school. Such an expansion would not be intended to expand the capacity of the school beyond 400, the current enrollment of the school, but is intended to remove portables at the site.
Thank you, Trustee Higginson. Motion's been seconded by Trustee McKay. Would you like to move the motion or motivate the motion?
I think the motion is a little bit, anyway, we just did this in the capital plan, so it's already there. But I appreciate that this actually kind of clarifies what that expansion would be, and that it wouldn't impact the culture of that school, which is actually quite special. You know, really clarifying that the board has a lot of support behind requesting an expansion for Departure Bay. And also just want to say, as part of that process many years ago, Departure Bay was once on the chopping block. And I'm you know, as we see the changing and shifting nature of the demographics of our community, I'm really happy to see that the programs have thrived, and I'm really thankful to the staff for all the efforts they've put into creating that really beautiful community there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion on motion 2? Seeing none, I will call the question. Is there anyone opposed to motion 2? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. And for the final motion, number 3, is there's we have Trustee O'Neill who would like to move that motion.
Thank you, Chair. And of course, as soon as I go to take off my video, I lost the motion. Okay, here we go. That the board directs staff to prepare for the reopening of Rutherford Elementary School and the redrawing of the boundaries of McGurr, Randerson Ridge, and Frank Nay, with the potential of other minor boundary shifts, with an opening date of either September 2024 or 2025, as determined following the district's confirmation of enrollment early October 2022.
Thank you, Trustee O'Neill. The motion has been seconded by Trustee Berzovic. Would you like to motivate the motion?
Well, I just would say I'm fully in support of this this motion and recommendation, and I do appreciate that this has been quite the topic, certainly in our term as trustees, and I have to give great respect to Mark in his presentation and the thoughtful approach that the district will be taking in moving this plan forward, specifically in further consultation and preparedness of the communities that will be impacted by this down the road. So a thank you for that, and a thank you to all who participated in this process. I'm quite happy to be able to move this particular motion.
Thank you, Trustee O'Neill. So we do have a speakers list, and so far we have Trustee Higginson, Berzovic, and McKay. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody. So Trustee Higginson is first.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Trustee O'Neill for moving the motion. I just want to say that it's, you know, this feels very, very good. This was a very difficult decision for the board a number of years ago, and to see us be in this position where we can contemplate this and to hear staff talk about the fact that hopefully it won't have a negative impact on programming is meaningful. And I'm really thankful to everyone who came out to participate, to have this recommendation be part of the recommendations from the Long Range Facilities Plan Committee. So just it feels almost like a bittersweet full circle, but I'm really, really glad that we are in this position in the district where we can start entertaining the reopening of schools rather than the position we were in a number of years ago. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Higginson. Trustee Berzovic.
I just want to speak in favor of this recommendation. First of all, kudos to staff for the overall plan. It's very thorough, but in terms of all of it, but particularly this, it showed a real, I think it will grow the confidence of our community, because we said that in creating this long range facilities plan that we would only ask for feedback if we were really willing to listen to it and really hear it. And staff, by putting out those options and then hearing that feedback, they've built that, I think, some of that trust with the community, that when we say we want to know what you think and we say this is an option that we're open to considering, that we're really considering it. So I think this will do a great deal of good for our district. I think it will encourage people who have been questioning whether they want to move to the area, in terms of not necessarily wanting their children in the larger schools the way McGurr and Frank Nay are. So I think this really is a win-win for the district. So kudos to staff.
Thank you, Trustee Berzovic. Trustee McKay.
Sure. I think I'm going to speak to all three of them, even though I'm speaking to one particular motion that's on the floor at the moment. I'm going to go back a little bit in time and acknowledge a few different things that brought us to today, and maybe not going back as far as people might think that I would. My first person I'd like to acknowledge is yourself, Greg. You encouraged the board to consider a new policy that we needed to have on the books around public participation and consultation. And that process led us down a path where we actually really were thoughtful every time we go out to ask the community for their feedback. And I think that that had a great deal of influence over the process that we've undertaken here. So thank you for that work that we did a little while back now. Feels like a long time ago, but again, I want to acknowledge the Long Range Facilities Plan Committee. There was a lot of conversation. We had a lot of conversation about capacity and how to address particularly the North End in order to come up with a consultation plan. That feedback to create the consultation plan was very effective so that we could access community input in order to make this decision. And it was a significant number of meetings that we held that we focused on this topic. So I appreciate that as well. To staff, most importantly, maybe not most importantly, but I'll give it to you tonight. The communications department has done an excellent job on presenting the options through our consultation process in a way that is meaningful and understandable to the public. And I think that that's also a really important piece that we can't get lost here. In when we share information with the public in a way that they understand it, they're able to truly give us their real feedback so that we can be responsive to the community needs. And finally, I'd like to thank the board for being patient through the process of bringing this forward, considering all of those things so that we could do this in a really meaningful way, hearing back from the community. And lastly, I suppose I said finally before, but I didn't mean it. I'd like to thank everybody that participated in the consultation process because it helps inform us to make good decisions. So in closing, I wholeheartedly support all three motions this evening, and I believe that they set us up for a successful future. And that's what I hope for students is to know that they'll know what's coming and how the board is looking to support them through the best use of our facilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair McKay. So I'm next on the list, and I'll be speaking in favor of the motion number 3. I think what I like about this approach is that staff has taken the time to put in a thoughtful and reasoned approach to make sure that if the board proceeds with reopening Rutherford, that it's done in a way to ensure its long-term sustainability. And that was very important to make sure if we're, as Mr. Walsh had said, we're not reopening a school to close it again. So I appreciate the approach, and we'll make sure that as this moves forward, it's going to be a long-term decision. So thank you for that. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak? I don't see anybody in the chat, so I will call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion number 3? Seeing none, the motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Moving on to item 8.7, Mr. Walsh with the LRFP for Ladysmith consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I just want to recognize the patience of yourself and all the trustees adding this item here at to make it quite a fulsome agenda. But what the board did in the Long Range Facilities Plan is it really focused on capacity and seismic safety. That's, I think, the name of the plan. And so we just saw the board talk about how we're going to address it in one of the priority areas, and that is the North End that's growing so fast. And here what you're seeing is staff putting together a report with the input of the Long Range Facilities Committee and our about how we're going to address capacity and seismic safety in Ladysmith. And so I think it's really stark when we look, particularly from a capacity perspective in Ladysmith. Just when we look at our elementary school population and just what a large percentage of our elementary school population are currently served in portables, and it's significant. So it's a priority. The other piece here, and one of the reasons that we asked for it to be on this meeting, is because, as we know, in March, the Ministry of Education supported, which is not approval, but it is support, to move to the next stage of getting Ladysmith Intermediate seismically upgraded, and we can already anticipate that to be the single largest capital project in the district's history until we get to ND here, hopefully soon. But what the ministry wants to see, and what we've been planning all along, so it's very good, is a concept plan of what it could all look like. So we have this opportunity with Ladysmith Intermediate Seismic coming to solve more than just Ladysmith Intermediate. And so what we've done, very similar to the North End, is we've created a number of scenarios for folks to mull over, have a look at, in order to see how we're going to proceed. And so I'm going to go over those briefly, and perhaps I'm going to get Ms. Matthews to bring up the plan itself, so I can kind of go through it like that. And I apologize if I'm taking too much time. So again, so we see a kind of a statement reflecting the board's beliefs, as we think that they are, stemming from the long-range facilities plan. What we're trying to again do is not only get the public's feedback, but we're trying to use these documents, relatively simple templates, to educate our community about what our problem is, because you can't propose a solution if people don't understand what this particular problem is. And so we tried to link information and reports to this for people that are more interested in digging deep. Otherwise, we're hoping that the document it stands on its own. Similar to the North End, what we've done is we've taken the scenarios and run them through a variety of different issues to contemplate, slightly different than the North End. And Karen, could you just go back to the previous page? So you'll see we examine each scenario with the capital cost, the seismic safety of the building, what the operational cost of the scenario would be, the suitability of the site, walkability, etc. The one thing that you'll see, the educational impact of the scenario, is a little bit more in depth, because there's a significant potential change that will impact the way education is provided in that particular area of the district, depending on the scenario. So if you could go forward. So you'll see the plan really focusing on the elementary schools that would be largely impacted as a result of whatever the outcome of the scenario is. Two things to note: we really don't see an outcome that's significant to Ladysmith Secondary, so we didn't include it. And we may want to expand our discussion to talk with Cedar, to talk with Cinnabar, to talk with Chase, because there theoretically could end up being some minor shifts to catchments in there as a result of the outcome. Similar consultation kind of concept, not finalized just yet. Obviously, the board might want to have a say. We are trying to move this relatively fast, so we can present a concept to the ministry, and we're hoping that with community support and board support, that it's going to really help build our business case. Next, Karen. So you'll see some of the background information that we have, and some of the basis from the long-range facilities plan, as we're always trying to put what our planning is to align with the board's long-range facilities plan. It's really fundamental that we are able to connect them back and forth. If you want more information on the schools, they're all there. Next page, please. So scenario one, it outlines again, you'll see the template from the North End very similarly. So replace Ladysmith Intermediate at a different site, creating a K-7 dual track option. So the big shifts here would be bringing French immersion back to Ladysmith. The second one would be making both Ladysmith elementary schools K to 7. So very significant change to the way we're operating our schools. And so again, the graphics, which you can get in viewed in a more deep way, show what it all looks like if the status quo happens, and then what happens if we do some expansions and implement the plan. So a variety of different the capital costs are outlaid, etc., that are there for you. A couple of things to really, I think, to focus on here. So again, the big impacts is a Cole North Oyster wouldn't be French immersion following this change. Their Ladysmith Intermediate would cease to exist, and we would likely be required to sell that particular parcel of land to help fund the project. We would need to probably take a little bit of Ladysmith Secondary's field. We do feel there's enough to make sure that there's robust room at what currently is the Ladysmith Primary for a K to 7 option. And then we'd likely rely on Davis Road, not the school as it is, because it's not functional, it's not seismic, it's worn out, it's too small. We'd likely rebuild using that site. If the site didn't work, we might look at a different one. Next page, please. I'll also note in all three of these scenarios that we're looking at, there's not a really big operational cost to the district, as we wouldn't be opening additional facilities. We'd be saving money on the fact that we wouldn't have bus routes to a French immersion facility, but largely there are going to be negligible savings, perhaps a bit of expense as North Oyster. If it shrinks too much, that we'd be kind of subsidizing it a little bit. We're going to try our best to avoid that if this is the scenario. So again, we put it through all the different scenarios. I won't go with the answers. You can read it for yourself. Next page. And perhaps I can just comment that our educators wrote the educational impact of number 10, and we had participation from educators in the zone that are currently working within those schools, and so good to just sort of you're aware of that. That's some initial feedback that we've had. So it certainly wasn't. It wasn't seen as a terrible idea to move to K to 7. There was definitely benefits visualized. The last one, I just want to put the intangibles of really all three options is hopefully the opportunity to partner with either the town of Ladysmith or perhaps Staminas or both at building a neighborhood learning center at whatever facility that we actually do rebuild. We are gunning hard we are trying hard to make sure that whatever we do means a new Ladysmith Intermediate, refurbishing that school, given all the systems are old and the accessibility is just unacceptable. That's what we're aiming for. So our North Star on this project is not to have Ladysmith Intermediate as it currently stands when we're done. So second one is slightly similar to the first option, but it's rather than bring French immersion back from Eno, we just create 2 elementary K to 7 schools in Ladysmith. The problem with this one, and I'll point out right now, is when you look at the little map in the bottom right, when you take your time to read the report, is that there is a risk that the Davis roadside, whatever that school might look like, might end up being a little bit small from an enrollment perspective, and we'd have to move the boundaries so far north that we'd be making kids like really close to what the current primary site is, walk to what the Davis Road site is, which may not be the best option. So just there's a bit of a caution there. We couldn't really come up with a design from a catchment perspective that was really great in that circumstance. And unfortunately, our limit is that we have this great opportunity to build a new facility, likely out of Ladysmith Intermediate, but Ladysmith Primary is going to be somewhat limited in what we can do with it. So scenario 3, Aaron, if you want to move forward, and forward again. So scenario 3 is essentially status quo, but trying to take care of our capacity issues. So Ladysmith Intermediate looks like if you rebuilt it at its current size, it might need to be a little bigger. Ladysmith Primary does need some capacity, and Eno needs some capacity. And so that shows you what would happen there. So just a couple of points to make, and I mentioned the two English K-7s in Ladysmith, the problems that might exist there. Just to be very straightforward again, if we did this, we're likely to have to dispose of the Ladysmith Intermediate site to help pay for the capital upgrades. So that's, I think, something that we should be very aware of. The potential impact on French immersion at Eno, and Eno's boundary would have to get bigger. Luckily, we bus so many kids in that area that we could turn the buses south, for instance, from Cinnabar or sorry, from Chase as an example. But again, there's an impact on folks that we need to just be cognizant of. So when we do consult, that's something that might be that might impact them. So overall, however, I think that this plan really does reflect what we've heard from the Ladysmith subcommittee, which included a variety of folks from the Ladysmith area when we consulted. A lot of the feedback we've heard, I think, from the city council in Ladysmith as well, some options to put there. And before I turn to questions, the last thing I just want to point out is we purposefully excluded an option that had a single Ladysmith elementary school. Is it an option if people wanted? Sure, it would be a very big school, and it's certainly something that we didn't feel there was a wellspring of desire to have. Karen, you can close this now, thanks. A wellspring of desire to have, so we did not propose it. So nothing prevents the community from coming up with a better idea, because I'm sure there are, but there you go. That's just a limit that we purposefully chose. So happy to answer any questions, but you will see the report ready to go and a recommendation to recommend to the board to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Anyone with questions? Anyone like to move the motion? Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. The Business Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District 68 and Nanaimo Ladysmith direct staff to initiate a consultation process with respect to addressing capacity issues with potentially impacted communities in Ladysmith and report back to the board with recommendations and next steps for the board to consider.
Thank you, Trustee Higginson, and the motion has been seconded by Trustee Wilkinson. Would you like to motivate the motion?
I would, thank you. First, I want to thank the community of Ladysmith because they've been very patient. And, I appreciate Secretary Treasurer Walsh that you mentioned that part of the report talks about, laying out the context of the problem. But I'll tell you, Ladysmith knows the problem. That's a passionate community that has been waiting for us to pay some attention to them. And sometimes they just lack the sheer numbers to get our attention. And so part of the long range facilities plan recommendation 13 makes specific mention of Ladysmith to try to make sure that they know that they are a priority for the board. And so I'm really looking forward to going through this process and making sure that we can help create schooling facilities in the town of Ladysmith that meet the current needs and the demographics of that town. It is changing and shifting and has changed and shifted considerably since the last facilities plan that affected them. And so I look forward to us working closely with them. And I also want to give credit to the City Council. The councillors have worked closely with us and been strong advocates for the needs of the students in the community and making sure that there's schooling facilities that meet the growth and the long-term plans for Ladysmith. So I just look forward to working on this plan together with the town of Ladysmith and with the parents who, I've been the zone rep once and they were for a couple of years and they were very passionate and very constructive in their engagement on this issue. So looking forward to seeing the end results of this. And I also appreciate Secretary Treasurer Walsh saying that there is room for more suggestions. So just for folks to know that there's room for more suggestions in this. Looking forward to it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Trustee Berzovic.
Thank you, Chair. To echo a bit of what Trustee Higginson said, I'm currently actually the zone rep of in this region of our community, and these are really engaged, really thoughtful parents and staff and community in general, and I'm just very excited for them. I know how anxious they are to get involved in this consultation. And I just want to say, just looking at the previous North End consultation, I have extreme confidence in our staff that they will do an excellent job of giving everyone in that community a real ample opportunity to get their thoughts out and share them with us. So this is great.
Thank you, Trustee Berzovic. Any other comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Seeing none, the motion carries. Before we move on, I just want to thank our facilities and information and all the other staff involved. They're going to be very busy in the next coming months. There's a lot of work to do in relation to our facility, so I appreciate all the efforts that you already have and you will be putting into these projects. Moving on, we don't have any correspondence referred from the regular board meeting, no unfinished business, no new business, and no questions. So can I get a motion to adjourn? Moved by Trustee O'Neill and seconded by Trustee McKay. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.